Good evening and welcome to 7 Eyewitness News. I'm Samantha Ratt and thank you for joining us tonight. Let's take a look at the major headlines. The Planning Minister instructs the chairman of the Shagwaramas Development Authority to clear the air and speak to the media. A 13-year-old girl has been sexually assaulted by a male relative. A 22-year-old man was held with a gun and ammunition last evening. Independent Senator Dr. Ralph Balgobin says this country's judiciary is flat on its back. In business, the Planning Minister says it is unacceptable for any state board to try to sabotage the government. Straight to our top story now. Planning Minister Dr. Boendradan Tiwari says he has instructed the chairman of the Shagwaramas Development Authority to clear the air and speak with the media. And this after reports indicated that the CDA requested telephone records for a reporter from TSTT after a story was published in the newspaper about the state company. The CDA has since denied making any request, insisting it just requested the phone records for its own company. TSTT has assured it will investigate the matter further. But Minister Tiwari does not want the reporter who did this story to interview the CDA officials. He wants an independent reporter.
Tell me so, and that they did not make themselves accessible, and I asked the chairman if he would please arrange for an interview so that he can express his point of view, and I asked him if he would get in touch with the CEO so that she can express her point of view.
He says the CDA has denied all claims.
As of now, despite the newspaper report, the response from my chairman is that the article is incorrect. That is to say that there was no request from TSTT for the phone records.
The Planning Minister also acknowledged that trouble has been brewing at the board of the CDA.
The board has been too fractious, it has been too contentious. I have not had harmony. This is a board I inherited. It was not a board that I recommended. It has been fractious, it has not had harmony, and they seem to be what can I say, not receptive to reasonable discourse. At the end of the day, the judgment on all of these things will have to be made, first of all, by myself, and secondly, ultimately, by Cabinet.
National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister, Captain Gary Griffith, remains tight-lipped over the death threat to the Prime Minister, stating that he does not wish to jeopardize the case. Griffith also highlighted that despite his portfolio, due to the mere sensitivity of the case, he is also not privy to much information. Nikolai Marfan, 23 years old, was charged for threatening the life of Prime Minister Kamla Prasad Bisasa. Marfan, a porter at the Piarco International Airport, was granted bail to the sum of $75,000 and has since pleaded not guilty to the charge. He is accused of making a phone call to officers of the E999 Rapid Response stating his intent, and Marfan was arrested during a sting operation by members of the Port of Spain CID. Now, this death threat comes on the heels of death threats made against the leader of the opposition, Dr. Keith Rowley. In some more news now, it is the responsibility of every citizen to lend a helping hand in eradicating poverty. And this was the very strong message sent to the citizens of TNT by Minister of the People and Social Development Dr. Glen Ramadasing during a poverty reduction exhibition today at Bupsing Park, Penal. And this as the world gets ready to celebrate tomorrow Poverty Eradication Day. Keisha Charles reports.
Be your brother's keeper. This was the call being made by the Minister of the People and Social Development, Glen Ramadasing. He says this is an important tool in fighting poverty. The minister made the comments while speaking during the Poverty Reduction Day and Micro Enterprise Exhibition at Bupsing Park, Penal earlier today. As the world prepares to celebrate World Poverty Eradication Day on October 17th, he says it is the responsibility of every citizen to lend a helping hand.
We all have a responsibility to give our fellow citizens who are struggling daily to survive help and hope.
Dr. Ramadar Singh says citizens must start caring for each other in order to make the country a better place. He lashed out at communities which allow neighbors to dwell in unsanitary conditions.
Is that if we want Trinidad and Tobago to be a better place, we must begin to look out for those who need help and assistance that we had gotten at some point in our lives.
He says food security is also a key element in the fight against poverty.
And we must be able to draw and withdraw from that wealth by engaging our elders and mentors who know how to grow food, who know how to keep bees, who know how to get milk production going from a very small, well-run unit.
The minister said that 355 grants in the sum of $5,000 have already been distributed to 14 regional corporations as part of the government's poverty reduction program. He boasted that the $1.5 million spent to get persons out of poverty is more than any other administration has spent in this fight. For 7 Eyewitness News, I'm Keisha Charles.
Meanwhile, the Regional Social and Human Development Council of Chaguanas will be hosting a panel discussion to promote World Poverty Day. In an interview with 7 Eyewitness News last evening, Noreen Dancliffe Furlong, a supervisor attached to the Ministry of Social Development, outlined the focus of the discussions.
Our focus groups would be schools and children at CXC level and lower 6 and upper 6. It will take the form of a panel discussion. The panel will consist of Dr. Asha Cambon of ECLAC, Dr. Kenneth Niles, a lecturer in aging and a pastor at the university and a pastor, and Mr. Husani, an ex-principal and the representative on the Trinidad and Tobago Commission for UNESCO.
She says poverty is not simply as a lack of economic resources, but also as a lack of knowledge and skills.
Have access the micro-enterprise grant. And I say grant and not loan because they don't have to repay it. What happens is that we work with individuals who have a good business idea but cannot approach the bank for funding because they probably don't have the collateral that the bank would be asking for. We also work along persons in trying to keep proper records when the business gets going. And the business could span from selling of clothing, making clothing, to somebody wanting a worker because the grant amount is $5,000. The regional micro-project grant is $50,000 and that is available to groups in the area.
And the event is scheduled for October 17th at Plaza de Montrose between the hours of 9 a.m. and 12 noon. While the Office of the Chief Personnel Officer is not operating in the best interest of workers. And this was the view of Government Senator and leader of the National Union of Government and Federated Workers, James Lambert. He made the comments while making his contribution to the 2012-2013 budget debate in the Senate last night.
In the labor movement, do not believe that the CPO office takes into consideration the terms and conditions of the employment of public sector workers.
The trade union has been up in arms against the government over the slow pace of negotiations for the period 2008 to 2010. The movement has been rejecting government's 5% offer to public servants. However, Lambert told the House he is confident that under the People's Partnership government, all pending negotiations will be settled in a timely manner.
Have said quite clearly that no longer negotiations and collective bargaining in Trinidad and Tobago will go as long as it did.
Well, this just in, former Minister of Tourism Joseph Ross has been robbed on the beat-up at gunpoint. We will bring you more details when it comes to hand. Independent Senator Dr. Ralph Balgobin says there is little or no productivity in Tobago, and his comments came during debate on the 2012-2013 national budget in the Senate earlier. According to Dr. Balgobin, something needs to be done about this given the amount of monies being allocated to the island in the budget.
There is a major problem of productivity in Tobago, and the whole debate It's about how much money they are entitled to.
He also expressed his concern over the estimated revenue for the island over the next 12 months.
For the Port of Spain City Corporation is bigger than the amount of revenue that Tobago generates. Well, if the numbers are wrong, somebody do tell me. Look at there. But the demand is for billions.
Meanwhile, Trade and Industry Minister Vasid Bharat says the government will be paying off debt for the next 17 years. And he's blaming the former PNM administration for this burden after they left behind a $7.5 billion deficit.
We're all aware of the extravagance of the Brian Lara Stadium, the Scarborough Hospital, the waterfront projects that we have here that we will be paying off over the next 17 years.
Minister Bharat says oil, gas and energy prices were at their highest under the PNM administration.
Since 1993, this country suffered what was called negative growth. Negative growth of 3.5%, Madam Vice President. We must take all of that into context to in determining the budgetary statement that Minister Hawaii has presented here for the period, the fiscal year 2013. We must also remind ourselves, lest we forget, that revenues were at an all-time high. Gas revenues were, gas prices were $13.06. Oil prices were at a high of $147, Madam Vice President. And in fact, energy revenues was at an all-time high of $29.9 billion.
To some more news now, one independent senator believes that this country's judiciary is flat on its back. Dr. Ralph Balgobin says the judiciary is overrun with cases despite the low detection rate by the police.
In my view, is flat on its back. The Chief Justice may disagree, and he's entitled so to do. But I think that they have been overrun by the sheer volume of cases coming at them.
Senator Balgobin said institutions such as the judiciary have been starving for resources.
Institutions in our society have been starved of resources for years. The budgetary allocations to them are really not about driving meaningful transformation. They just roll over spend.
In some more news now, a 13-year-old girl was reportedly sexually assaulted and buggered by a close male relative. It is reported that the teenager, who lived with her foster parents in Caroni for several years now, was visited regularly by this particular relative. Between January and October of this year, the girl reported that she was raped twice during these visits and on one occasion buggered while out with a man for a drive. Her foster parents informed the police, and after investigations by Senior Superintendent Dulal Chand, Superintendent Abraham and officers from the Caroni police station headed by Sergeant Gobin, the 42-year-old male relative was arrested yesterday, and he is expected to appear before Shogunas magistrate tomorrow to be charged with these heinous offences. A 22-year-old man was held with a gun and other ammunition last night. Sources say the Central Division Task Force headed by Corporal Ken Ali were on patrol on the Couva Main Road around 8:30 p.m. last night. Upon reaching KC Confectionery, they saw a man with a plastic bag in his hands. The man ran when he saw the officers. They held him and searched his bag. They found a .38 revolver and several rounds of .38 special ammunition in a mosquito coil box. The Couva resident was arrested and is expected to appear before a Couva magistrate tomorrow. The operation was supervised by Senior Superintendent Dulal Chand and Superintendent Abraham. Stay with us, much more news ahead. Welcome back, and some more news now. One of this country's leading manufacturers is calling on the government to start protecting the local manufacturing sector. And the call comes from Ronald Grosberg from Diana Candy. Grosberg says business is tough for manufacturers and it's difficult to survive in the global scheme.
Today, manufacturing is extremely tough. Surviving is extremely hard. Those who are here in manufacturing are survivors. I don't know of any new manufacturing in the last 12 years. No one is crazy enough to get into manufacturing in the environment in which we are in now. I don't have it. I might as well go to China, buy my stuff ready-made, bring it in here, pack it. All I need to do is teach someone how to use a stapler and to buy a bag and to put on a label. That's what the market is here.
Grasberg also questioned when the government would make a final decision on the VAT issue, especially with Christmas just around the corner.
On this VAT issue, my customers are asking, when is that decision going to come? We don't want to stock. Christmas is in the air unless we know whether we are paying VAT or we're not paying VAT. So I'd like to get an early decision on the VAT issue.
In response, Trade and Industry Minister Vasit Bharat says the basic food item list is still being finalized.
The Prime Minister's deadline of November the 15th. Sometime during the course of next week, we will have finalized that listing of products that conform to what we determine to be basic items. And
President of the Manufacturers Association, Dominic Hadid, says the government needs to be doing a whole lot more since this country hasn't seen many changes over the years. Hadid made the comments at a competitiveness forum hosted by the TTME today.
Like if we would have came back here in 2040, would I find a Trinidad and Tobago with clean roads, no potholes, no traffic, no crime, jobs for all, intelligent people, constructive conversations in Parliament, bipartisanship for a country? I mean, that's what I'm asking for. 2% of this and 3% of that doesn't paint a picture. They come to Trinidad, I mean, 1 or 2 buildings have changed, but the mentalities have gotten worse.
In response, Planning Minister Dr. Boendra Tiwari tried to explain the government's objective, but the TTME president wasn't buying his explanation.
What we are after is an innovation-driven growth economy in which you're going to have a full employment knowledge economy.
I'm simple and I don't understand that. To the man on the street, how does it sound to him? I understand you, huh? Believe me, I do. But how do we get that message to get the inclusion, to get their buy-in?
Well, Planning Minister Dr. Tiwari says all state boards are presently being reviewed. The Prime Minister mentioned earlier this year that boards would have been reviewed along with the cabinet reshuffle, but that was not done at the time. Dr. Tiwari made the comments in line with the conflict brewing in the Chaguaramas Development Authority and reports of telephone records of a reporter being requested from TSTT.
So when the matters come to cabinet, they go to what is known as a board's review committee, and then they come back to cabinet.
He says there are 3 factors that all state boards should have, and one includes competence and good leadership.
The second thing is that you need to have boards that will not sabotage government policy. So you need to have a certain kind of when you need to have people on the board who understand what is their responsibility of being members of the board. And the third thing that you want really is that the board will have a certain kind of entrepreneurial quality in it that will envision and create things going forward.
Meanwhile, Trade and Industry Minister Vasit Bharat says doing business in this country has become very difficult over the years. In fact, he says it takes 297 days for a construction permit alone.
Many people who are listening to this debate will be nodding their heads in recognition of that fact. Because of the approvals for WASA, T&Tech, Town and Country, and all of the regulatory approvals, 297 days to get a construction permit in Trinidad.
Further afield, Finance Minister Larry Howard says there were initiatives that he would have liked to include in the budget to facilitate the private sector. However, he says, due to certain challenges, he was just unable to do so.
The problem is getting the processes within the various organs of the government to work in a way that would facilitate what we want to do.
Well, reporter Michelle Michael joins us next with tonight's Sports Cap. Stay with us.
A very good evening to you and thank you for joining us. I am Michelle Michael with your Sports Cap on 7 Eyewitness News. The World 2020 champions will face Bangladesh from November 3rd to December 12th and will play 2 test matches, 5 one-day internationals and 1 2020. Glaring with confidence after winning the 2020 World Cup, the West Indies side cannot afford to take Bangladesh for granted. This from veteran and power-hitting opening batsman Chris Gayle. He believes the forthcoming tour is likely to be challenging. Gayle, who is in a 15-man squad named on Saturday, declared that he and his teammates will not become complacent. He revealed that they will continue with intense training sessions ahead of the tour. Meanwhile, West Indies wicketkeeper Dinesh Ramdin is looking forward to the tour and wants to continue his good form with the bat. He said the tour of Bangladesh was an important one for himself and the West Indies team because it is their first assignment after their come-from-behind win in the World Cup, and they will be looking to keep the momentum going. The squad includes one on-cap player in 23-year-old Guyana left-arm spinner Veerasamy Permaul. The full squad is Darren Sammy as captain, Dinesh Ramdin as wicket-keeper and vice-captain, Tino Best, Darren Bravo, Shivnarayan Chandapal, Narsingh Devnarayan, Kirk Edwards, Asad Fudadin, Chris Gayle, Sunil Narayan, Veerasamy Permaul, Kieron Powell, Ravi Rampal, Kemar Roach and Marlon Samuels. In more cricket news, India's cricket legend and possibly the best batsman in cricket, Sachin Tendulkar, will be awarded the Order of Australia, one of the country's highest honours, Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard has said. Gillard, currently on a 3-day visit to India, said Tendulkar deserved the special honour because he was a very special cricketer. Tendulkar is the first cricketer to score 100 international centuries. The 39-year-old master blaster is also immensely popular with cricket fans in Australia. Cricket is, of course, a great bond between Australia and India, and we are both cricket-mad nations, Gillard said in Delhi. The 5 feet 5 inches little master blaster has played 55 test matches against Australia and scored 5,247 runs. He has also played 96 one-day internationals against the Aussies and scored 3,817 runs. And now taking a look at World Cup qualifying matches played today, Croatia beat Wales 2-0, Belgium got the better of Scotland 2-0, and Germany had a 4-4 draw against Sweden. In other matches, Bolivia hammered Uruguay 4-1, Spain had a 1-1 draw versus France, and Italy netted 3 against Denmark, who only scored 1. In more football news, Senegal has been disqualified from the 2013 African Cup of Nations. This after a riot forced the abandonment of Saturday's home tie with Ivory Coast. It is not yet clear whether the Confederation of African Football will take further action against Senegal. The match in Dakar was called off after 74 minutes, while Ivory Coast was 2-0 up on the night and 6-2 ahead on aggregate. Trouble fled after striker Didier Drogba scored his side's second goal from the penalty spot. Senegal manager Ferdinand Coly has apologized to Ivory Coast. Visiting supporters were forced to leap down on the pitch to escape as violence erupted, with home fans throwing missiles, stones, bottles and firecrackers. Ivorian players took refuge in the center circle, while the security forces used tear gas to disperse the rioting fans. And finally in tonight's Sports Cap, Andy Murray and Novak Djokovic threw everything at each other in Sunday's final of the Shanghai Masters. Murray, however, failed in his bid to make it a hat-trick of titles after losing a 3-set thriller to Djokovic. In the first meeting since Murray's win in the US Open final, Djokovic triumphed 5-7, 7-6, 13-11 and 6-3. Murray edged the first set, which had 7 breaks of serve, with Djokovic reacting angrily by smashing a racket. Djokovic saved 5 match points in the second set before taking the tie break and breaking Murray twice in the third. This title is Djokovic's 5th for the year. Murray has since expressed disappointment but has paid tribute to Djokovic. Well, that brings us to the end of your Sports Cap here on 7 Eyewitness News. I am Michelle Michael.
Well, on that note, we've come to the end of tonight's newscast. I'm Samantha Rattan, wishing you a very safe and blessed night on behalf of all of us here at Win Communications.